We recognize that team. They spend hours and hours, tons of volunteer hours, time, fundraisers, events. Just recognize them for the effort because it's all volunteer. They're just doing it for their love of the trails and their desire to see the trail system expand. And they didn't want the recognition. You could tell they were even uncomfortable receiving the recognition. To me, those are the people that usually need the recognition and deserve it, are the ones that are just doing it for the right reasons.
Welcome to Herrimanology,
the official podcast to keep up with Herriman City.
We'll take you inside the city, explore the latest news and updates, show you how your government operates, and discuss the issues that affect us all. Now, here are your hosts talking all things Herriman on Herrimanology.
All right, welcome to Herrimanology. It is Friday, January 24th. And you know, it's kind of crazy when New Orleans, Louisiana has more snow accumulated in like a day than we've had all winter.
Been rough. It's been upside down.
Good
yes.
Heavens.
It's crazy.
I would say good for them, but they probably don't really want the snow along the Gulf Coast. We do, but our snowpack is a little bit behind in northern Utah. I was looking at the numbers yesterday on the DNR's website. It's behind. We're not in dire straits. St. George kind of is.
Southern Utah is rough, yeah.
But up in northern Utah, not in dire straits yet, but we do want the snow.
We need some snow. We've got to have some this season.
At least in the mountains. My ideal winter is rain or nothing down here. Just enough to keep the pollution out.
Yep.
And snow all you want in the mountains.
Dump it. Yep. Dump it so they can ski and we can have water.
Fingers crossed. I feel like late January, February is usually the time that we start to see some of the heavier stuff.
Better. Hopefully. Hopefully.
Let's talk. By the way, Mayor Palmer carving out a few minutes on the end of hopefully the end of a very busy week for
Yes.
you. I'm John the Follett, communications manager. Wednesday was the city council meeting.
Right.
There were a few items of note, nothing too major. By the way, a lot of people are curious about the athletic complex. We're going to give that topic a rest today. We've had some community meetings about it. Nothing really new compared to what we talked about last week.
Correct.
Other than there have been a couple of community meetings since then. But if you have questions about the project, herriman.gov/athletic-complex, you'll get pretty much all the information you're going to need there.
Yep.
We'll probably address it again in another podcast as it progresses, but didn't want to just ignore that because a lot of people are curious about it.
Right.
But we'll punt that for another week.
Yep.
City council meeting. There are a couple of recognitions I want to mention first. First was the Trails Committee. For people who aren't aware that there is a Trails Committee, who are they? What do they do? Why were they recognized this week?
So the Trails Committee falls under the new nonprofit Friends of Herriman. And really, we were talking about it in council. This is why we created this nonprofit and spun it off away from the city, because the city only has, I think, one, maybe two employees that can focus on trails. And they're so busy maintaining. We've got a vast trail network, right? They don't have a lot of time to build and maintain a lot of the trails up in the hills, right? So the Trails Committee exists to help bring funding, to help maintain those trails, to help rally that entire community. So really, we had Brandon Priest in there at first. He had it off to a great start in that role under Friends of Herriman. There was, other people that did a great job before that too, but under the Friends group, Brandon Priest kind of started it at this new level, if you will, and then Tracy's come in and her team and just even elevated it even more, which is that's just fantastic, right? And so we recognize that team. They spend hours and hours, tons of volunteer hours, time, fundraisers, events. They had a couple of fun events. We went and walked at night, a glow stick hike. So just recognize them for the effort because it's all volunteer. They're just doing it for their love of the trails and their desire to see the trail system expand. And so we just wanted to recognize them and any of the pioneers before them, I guess you could say, that helped get us to this point, because everything's on the backs of the others, if that makes sense. So just a way to recognize the efforts being made in our community.
They're all very passionate about the trail. That's kind of what I got. I don't know very many of them very well. I know some of them. It was interesting to me at the end. I can't remember if it was you or someone else that said, do you just have anything to add? Kind of just a generic, anything you want to say? And all of them said, go use the trails.
Yeah.
Like just go enjoy them. There wasn't anything about, hey, please stay off when it's muddy or things like. It was just go have fun.
Yep.
And that's what they're there for, is because they love the trails and they want to put in their own personal time and effort and sweat into the community's trails. It's pretty cool.
Yep. And they didn't want the recognition. You could tell they were even uncomfortable receiving the recognition. And that, to me, those are the people that usually need the recognition and deserve it, or the ones that are just doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
So
So that was really cool.
Yep.
And after that, you also recognized our city manager, Nathan Scherpesky, who's been here
Almost 4 years.
About 3.5, 4 years.
Yep.
And why was he recognized this time around?
So he just passed 25 years of public service, and he's been a city manager in a few other cities, and so he just passed 25 years. So there's a national organization, a city managers association, that recognized him in September, I believe. He was at a conference in, I think, Boston or Philadelphia, somewhere.
I want to say Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh, that's where it was. It was actually. And he didn't tell us about it. But then when the plaque showed up, our assistant city manager tracked it down, and we wanted to recognize him. He's just done a great job here, and I think we're going to get him on the podcast soon. I think people need to learn more about him. They get to be the kind of face behind, he's kind of the CEO of the city, if you will. Like, we're the board of directors, if you will, how we work, and he's the CEO, and so it was just nice to recognize him he's done great stuff, and his leadership has been, fantastic for the city.
Yeah. So. Moving on to another part of the city council meeting, I wanted to mention an annual financial audit was completed. That might be oversimplifying what it was, but it's not usually the most riveting part of
Right.
the city council meeting, and
Right.
everybody knows that, including the people who are doing the audit. But it's a really important part of the year, really important function that happens. What was that item, and what was the outcome of the audit?
Really, just like you said, the annual review that we bring in an outside auditing firm. This was our first time with a new auditing firm, and they came in and just our financials are solid, right? We've just got Kyle, who is our financial director. Just our financials are good, right? There were a couple small, like any auditor is going to find a couple of things, right?
Sure.
But that's everything. The major stuff, everything's good. We receive awards as a city for our financials, reporting and how we're running the city. So it was just a check-in, that annual check-in to make sure somebody else is looking at the books, but everything's looking like truly for the resident. Everything is on the up and up.
A few work meeting items, and again, there's the general meeting that starts at 7:00, and that's in the council chambers, and their audience chairs and public comment and all that. Before the general meeting is the work meeting.
Right.
And if you've listened to Herrimanology, you're very aware of this, but if you're new, welcome.
Right.
But in the work meeting, there are a few discussions of interesting note. First was an update on the intersection of Main Street and Herriman Rose Blvd. That's near the city hall. That's been a topic of public discussion, at least for that surrounding area,
Right.
for the last year and a half or so.
Right.
What was the update in this meeting?
So there were a couple of, and I know we've got a couple emails even since then, some concern that they feel like we haven't looked at some solutions. Like, we're trying to find some short-term solutions mixed in with some long-term. Like, it's short-term's hard because we've got budgeting already approved for certain projects and certain things. So if we try to find a couple of quick fixes now, there were a couple of things brought up in emails I think we should readdress real quick in the next few weeks. But again, it was trying to find some quick fixes to make this area in front of City Hall, next, down by Silver Crest Elementary, a little bit safer, or at least that feeling of more security. So some short-term things we've looked at, long-term things I still think we need to keep looking at those options.
Yeah. Some people have been curious. I've gotten a couple of emails over the last couple of months. Is there an update on fiber internet or high-speed internet? Yes and no is probably the best answer.
Very fair, yeah.
But what was the discussion this week? And maybe just kind of a general update, because I feel like that was a project there was a frequent discussion for a while, and then it kind of clicked pause about a year ago.
Wow.
And there hasn't been a whole lot of movement, at least as far as the public is concerned, since then. So maybe what's an update you can give?
Well, as everybody probably knows, we were looking at doing our own municipal fiber network here in the city. Truly, when we went to run the final numbers to bond for that, the initial bond, wouldn't have bonded for the whole thing, but that initial bond, interest rates, as we know at that time, were it just wasn't feasible at that point. So at that point, we put out an intent to negotiate with some different providers, and ultimately we landed with kind of primarily with All West to start with. They had been building out in the city, but so this was just a discussion kind of to talk about, again, no approvals yet, but it seemed to be heading in a good direction that we will let All West use some of our conduit in exchange for them connecting to some of our critical infrastructure, which is a win-win, right? But then the key part for the public is that they'll build out more of the city. And I looked right at them last night and said, do you plan to build out the whole city? And they said, yes, that is the plan right now. So still, we're hoping now, that bond we were going to have to issue was going to be expensive. We're hoping now with a partner like this, with the kind of some shared costs, we can still do that without having to bond for that $60 million bond that eventually would have been. And I think with that, we had some other providers there interested in where we were headed. So we did approve it to be in the PUE. Well, we didn't. I think we will approve it to be in the PUE, which again, I know that's a headache for the residents to be in the the front yards and their park strips. That's a headache, right? But that's how you get a better, more reliable product. People are going away from micro trenching. It's long-term costs on the roads, so it's a short-term pain, right? It is, but we think overall it's going to be worth it for the residents.
Yeah. So a couple of notes on that. We would love as a city to be able to force any private company to go build out the whole city, and that's not really an option. They can tell us that they plan eventually to go fill out the entire city and provide fiber-optic network, high-speed internet to everybody. We can't promise that. We hope.
Right.
Correct. At least as of now, they're telling us they plan to eventually get everywhere. So fingers crossed that holds.
Yeah, I hope so.
But this agreement was so that they can use conduit and the PUEs, and I'll explain that in a second a little bit more. And in return, the city would be able to use their network to control city facilities like stoplights, stormwater gates, water infrastructure, things like that, and be able to help enhance public services.
Right.
And in a way that some people may notice, other people may or may not.
Right.
But it's really going to help the city function more efficiently in a more modern way. And just we've used the term smart city before. Just having a lot of our infrastructure be able to connect to an internal network and be able to control things, it's going to help move things along much more efficiently.
Yep.
And with the PUE that you mentioned, public utility easement is what that means. A quick snapshot of that is, in general, the roadway out in front of your house is, again, most often public property.
Right.
The curb, the gutter, the park strip, and the sidewalk still are all public property. It's generally up to the residents to maintain the park strip, but usually, again, there are exceptions, but usually that is still city property. Mm-hmm. The difference with the public utility easement is the first few feet of your yard are most often part of a public utility easement. That is private property. That is your property. But when it was signed and platted and approved and all that, there's a section of this PUE area that public utilities like gas or power, sewer, and in this case, potentially fiber through All West would be able to go in and frankly dig up part of your yard. They have to restore it, but they can go into your private property and install their conduit or their fiber lines and then restore back to how it was.
Right.
So just a heads up there. We're going to give people a heads up the best we can as if and when this advances. But not everybody loves that when when it goes on their private property, but legally that's how it works. So just a heads up there.
And we're not the only city that operates like that.
Right.
That's, everybody does. So that's not unique to Herriman, but
Right.
just it's tough. It's it's weird, right? I think it's not what you really plan for, but yeah, and they do their best to mitigate but could be good. I mean, there's pros and cons to it, but I think the benefit outweighs the hassles.
And one more discussion. This actually happened at the beginning of the meeting, but about parks fertilization. And just a bit of background. For years, the city, as far as we know, always has contracted with outside services for fertilizing the lawn areas in city parks. What was this discussion about, and what might be changing going forward?
Well, it's interesting. We talked in there. Every city or every position, every cost, I think, gets to a point where it makes sense to move it in-house sometimes, right? That's what we did with Herriman PD. At that point, it made sense to move that in-house. That's what we're looking at now. That started to look like the cost to do that annually. We could actually hire that in-house and put a full-time employee on it 6 months and still be under the cost, including the equipment, everything. And we'd still have an employee for another 6 months on top of that, right? So they could do that job for less money and get it done in 6 months, and then you basically got free labor for 6 months. If that's, I mean, it's not really free labor, right?
Yeah.
But there's no additional, we're already saving money, so that extra time is. So really, it's just we feel like we hit that number now where it justifies bringing that in-house now. So we feel like we can do better with quality control, managing that, make sure they get to all the areas needed in the city, and then during the winter and off times, we've got an extra employee that can really help, and we're still saving taxpayers money at the end of the day.
Yeah. So basically, the money that has been used for third-party services and now in-house for the same cost ish, and then the extra 6 months of an extra parks employee that's desperate. I mean, every department really desperately needs employees, but parks is near the top of that list. So just a way that the city is trying to maximize public money.
Yep.
That's probably good enough for today.
Yes. I'm good with that. Yes.
Hopefully we can take a rest this weekend and get on to week 2 of the legislative session next week.
Can't wait.
We'll have some updates. Hopefully we'll have a special Herrimanology at some point. We'll see.
Oh yeah.
Should
we tease it a little bit? Let's tease it a little bit.
All right.
We're talking about going to the Capitol to kind of, it's interesting, right? I'd never been super involved at that level before. So we're going to go up and try to get on with at least 1 or 2 of our legislators and kind of do a on-site, just make it a little bit different. Just give a look there and put a face behind some of our legislators and see what they're doing, and we'll see. Like it's in the
Fingers
works.
crossed.
We're talking. Yes.
It's a time of year where if you get 6 minutes with somebody, like that's a treat. That's a luxury.
Yep.
So we'll see how it goes. Let's see if schedules line up. That's the hope.
It'd be fun.
So
yep.
As always, send us a question or leave a comment, give a rating, and we'll be happy to answer any questions in future episodes. So thanks, Mayor Palmer, for carving out a few minutes.
Yep. Have a great weekend.
You as well. Thanks for listening and watching, and we'll catch you next time.